Hello, today we are going to look at the AO1 for negligence. So about 10 key points really that you should put in a scenario question or an essay. Obviously you have to explain them a bit more than I'm going to do, but this should hopefully give you the structure of the key points. So first of all, I would say that negligence is a tort, it's a civil wrong, where an act or omission causes injury to a person or damage to their property. The burden of proof is on the claimant and it's on the balance of probabilities. Then you need to look at element one. So element one, the defendant must owe the claimant a duty of care. So the case of Donoghue used the neighbour test and said you owe a duty to those closely affected by your actions. These days, though, we look at the Caporo test. So the next point, Caporo sets out a three-stage test for a duty of care. It is only used if there is no existing case which sets out a duty, and that's what Robinson established. So in other words, you know a doctor owes a duty of care to a patient, but if you had a drone flyer, does a drone flyer owe a duty of care to people around them? So if you know there's already a duty of care, you don't have to use Caporo, but if you don't know if there's a duty of care, like there's no existing precedent, then use Caporo as normal. Now, Caporo's three stages. Stage one was damage or harm reasonably foreseeable. Kent is your case for that, and that was to do with the late ambulance, and yes, harm was reasonably foreseeable. Stage two, is there proximity of relationship between the defendant and claimant? So this means, are they close enough? Is their relationship close enough? That can be in time, in distance, and the actual relationship itself, so time, distance, space. And the cases that you need to think about here are Boar Hill, that was the woman who heard the crash and there was no proximity. McLaughlin saw her family after the crash and they said that the lorry driver did have a duty. So stage one, was harm reasonably foreseeable? Stage two, is there proximity? Stage three, is it fair, just and reasonable to impose a duty? So Robinson said that the police can now be sued. In Hill, the police were not allowed to be sued. And Robinson, recent case, 2018, is saying police no longer have blanket immunity from being sued. Element two is there must be a breach of the duty. So element one, you owe a duty of care. Caporo, three stages. Element two, there must be a breach of the duty. So what you need to discuss here is the fact that you are judged against a competent equivalent person. So a doctor is judged against a reasonably competent doctor, and that was the case of Bolam. So you look at how would a reasonably competent doctor have behaved in that situation? If they would have behaved like you did, there's no breach of the duty. Learner drivers, a bit controversial, but learner drivers are judged as if they are experienced drivers, and that's the case of Nettleship. And then a child is judged as a reasonably competent child of that age. That was Mullins, the girls who broke the rulers, and one of them was blinded. Still under element two, you need to consider risk factors to see if greater care must be taken. Special characteristics. So in Paris, he was blind in one eye, therefore they should have taken extra care with him. They didn't. Size of the risk. So Bolton, looking at the cricket ball case, it had only happened, I think, 6 times in 30 years or 5 times in 30 years. So the greater the risk, the more care you must take. Have you taken any precautions? So like Latimer, the factory floor case. If you had knowledge of the risk, then this is going to be worse for you as a defendant. So that was Rowe with the contaminated tubes. And then similarly, public benefit, we have to weigh up. This is also a risk factor. We have to weigh up if there was a public benefit. If there was, then you're much less likely to be liable. And then finally, element three, quite straightforward. This is causation. Factual causation, but for the defendant's actions, the end result would not have happened. That was Barnett. Legal causation, there must be no intervening acts, and you should take your victim as you find them, and that's the case of Smith. And then the final part is remoteness. This is the wagon mound case, and it said that damage must not be too remote, and the type of injury must be foreseeable. And you can back that up with the case of Hughes. So that is the AO1 that you need to know for negligence.